Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today I'm going to do a book review. I'm going to review Carter G. Woodson's book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro. This book is a masterpiece. I highly recommend it. And I'm just going to discuss briefly some of the themes that are raised in this book. And I really welcome your feedback. Often the comment sections are even more important than the actual video itself. I really welcome comments from individuals who have actually read the book. This should be a discussion about important issues. So I'm going to start out by reading a quote from the book that really sets the overall summary of what this book is about. It says that if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you don't have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. So that summarizes the problem of miseducation. African Americans have been miseducated. We have been taught to worship white people. We have been taught that white people are superior to us and that we are inferior. And this miseducation often helps perpetuate our status in this country, our condition in this country. And so I'm going to just talk about like one of the other key points that deals with this whole issue of miseducation. He talks about the whole issue of dependence versus independence. Instead of being educated to be independent, being educated to do for ourselves, to appreciate ourselves, to have pride in ourselves, we have been educated to be dependent, to be completely dependent on others. In this book, he talks about how African Americans had banks and businesses. He talks about how often those banks and other businesses would not succeed because African Americans did not have faith in themselves. They would rather receive second-class treatment at a white establishment than to support their own black establishment because they had been taught that everything white is right and everything black is wrong. They had been taught that black people can't own banks, that black people will not give you good service, that black people don't have certain skills. So they had been programmed to neglect their own businesses and to embrace businesses that disrespected them. You know, he provides examples of African American restaurants that had good service and good offerings. But instead of going to those black restaurants, many African Americans would go to white establishments where they basically had to get their food out of the back section of the restaurant. They had to enter from the back of the restaurant. They would subject themselves to those kind of conditions because they had been programmed to embrace an inferior position. And that programming deals with just the whole history. You know, the fact that African American and African history in general has been blotted out for the most part. And at the same time, when our history has been blotted out, Other people's history has been celebrated and emphasized and glorified and deified. We're taught about the greatness of Greece and Rome and of other parts of Europe. We're taught about European philosophers, European inventors, European scientists and artists and poets. But we're not taught about our own history. We're taught about European conquerors, European politicians, but we're not taught about our own kings and queens. We're not taught about our own scientists and inventors. We're not taught about our own philosophers. So we are miseducated and we're taught to worship these white people. We're taught to be dependent upon these white people. Often our schools don't even teach about entrepreneurship. We're not taught about how to build in our own community, how to do for our own selves. We graduate with master's degrees and law degrees and all other kinds of degrees, business degrees, but yet we don't even establish businesses because our system, our educational system is not designed to teach us to empower ourselves. It's designed basically to make us more efficient slaves for the system. And that's a problem. In his book, he also talks about the issue of leadership. How many of these leaders, they get these degrees, and because they have been miseducated, they don't have the right perspective when it comes to leadership. They look down upon their own people. Many of these African Americans who get higher education, they look down upon their people. They adopt a bourgeois, arrogant attitude when it comes to African American people. They distance themselves from their community. And many of them have an arrogant attitude. And there's an important quote in this book about leadership that really highlights his point. He talks about how leaders really should be servants of the people. That's the attitude that a true leader should have. He says that the servant of the people, unlike the leader, is not on a high horse, elevated above the people, and trying to carry them to some designated point to which he would like to go for his own advantage. The servant of the people is down among them, living as they live, doing what they do, and enjoying what they enjoy. That's the kind of leader that we need in our community. And that's what he talks about. We need servant leaders, people who are not trying to be on television. They're not trying to sell the next book to somebody. They're just trying to serve their community. So that's another important thing that he talks about leaders. And he also deals with the whole question of politics. He deals with the need for an independent black political type of establishment. He doesn't use those exact words, but he talks about the whole issue of politics. And he talks about how essentially if you are primarily supporting one party, you don't have much influence and much power. And he provides examples of how people essentially serve their own self-interest. How a lot of these African American politicians are really concerned about maintaining their position, their spot, and they're less concerned about improving the plight of the people. They're merely used to promote somebody else's agenda. And that's his primary point. We need political independence. We need to have our own political party. This is what I think. And we need to have, as Malcolm X talked about, an attitude of non-alignment when it comes to these political parties. We need to push our interests first and foremost, regardless of who is in power, regardless of which party is in power. See, other groups do this. When you look at the Jewish community, regardless of which political party is in power, that party must embrace the issues that are important to the Jewish community. And one of the biggest issues is Israel. So nowadays you have both parties who have no choice but to be pro-Israel. They have no choice but to support Israel. And the gay community is also moving in that direction in terms of garnering support from both parties. So nowadays, both parties are embracing same-sex marriage. Nowadays, the media has embraced that idea, and they push that agenda hard, regardless of who is in power, regardless of which party is in power. They push their agenda. And that's what we need to do. We need to push our agenda vigorously. And our civil rights organizations and political organizations need to do the same. We should not be pushing somebody else's agenda. We should not get our talking points and our agenda from somebody else's agenda. Immigration is not our agenda. That's not our issue. Gay rights is not our issue or our agenda. Abortion rights is not our agenda. We need to focus on issues that matter to Black people and put those first and foremost, and stop adopting and embracing every issue under the sun. Too often we embrace everybody else's struggle and neglect our own struggle. That's a major problem. Also, another key point that he emphasizes is the issue of reaction versus action. The issue of hindsight versus foresight. And too often African Americans are reacting to an event.